Okay, so in this video, we're going to take a look at the most recent examiner's report, and that is for the May 2019 exam session. So this video is in preparation for the August sitting, but a lot of the advice in examiner's reports are the same from sitting to sitting. There's a lot of repeated advice. A lot of things happen sitting after sitting. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to look at those key things, bring out those key tips for you going forward, so when you sit your exam in August, you'll be well prepared and you won't fall into those same pitfalls. You won't be making those same mistakes that previous students have made. And perhaps you're a student that has made some of these mistakes in the past. If you've sat the OCS before, this is the video that's going to help you to overcome those. So first of all, I would always recommend looking at the examiner's report. Every time you're doing a case study exam, once you've done OCS, you go up to MCS, SCS. Always look at the examiner's reports. It's full of really useful information. Okay, so the first point I want to point out here, and do read this through in full when you get the chance. You can find it on the CIMA website, CIMA Connect. You can download these, they're freely available. But the first point I want to pick out from this particular examiner's report is this cautionary note here that a longer answer does not necessarily mean a higher mark, and content needs to be relevant to the task given. So this is advice based on the fact that answers tend to be a bit longer. Students tend to be doing better against the time pressure. But just because you've written a lot doesn't mean it's going to get you marks. It has to be relevant to the answer. You have to be answering the question, basically. Now that seems like an obvious thing to say if you're sitting in an exam. Obviously you need to answer the question. But in these case study exams, your question is coming in the form of an email from your fictional boss. So it's not always the most straightforward thing to read an email and pick out precisely what it is from the F1 or P1 syllabus that you're being asked about. So a real skill in this exam is being able to read the email or the memo or whatever it is and identify the requirements, what specifically is being asked of you. So I'd always recommend reading the question twice or three times just to be really, really clear that you know exactly what is being asked of you, and every question, every paragraph, every sentence you write in your solution must relate back to that requirement. So no matter what you write, you are answering the question. Don't go off on a tangent. Don't write 5 paragraphs on something that's not going to score you any marks, because you're wasting your time and you're preventing yourself from getting marks in other areas as well, because of that time you've wasted on something that's not going to get you anything. Okay, so that's point 1. Make sure you're answering the question by identifying the requirements and being sure what it is you're doing. Next point is the use of headings. So what the examiner talks about here is that there are no marks for formatting, but using headings just helps with the structure of your exam, and it's what we call signposting. It clearly identifies your points throughout your answers. So as the examiner's going through, they'll see headings and they'll think, okay, they've done a paragraph on this or a couple of paragraphs on that, and it shows you've got a clear logical structure to your solution. The examiner knows exactly what is happening at each different stage, and they can award marks without any hesitation. Okay, and this further relates to planning. So what we always recommend, certainly for case study exams, is that you take a few minutes at the beginning of your question to plan out your solution, because your solution will be essentially in essay form. It's going to be a couple of pages. On the screen, it'll just be 1 page. It's a scrolling box, but it's going to be equivalent to a page or 2 of A4. And that's an essay form question. You need to plan that. You need to structure it out. So in your plan, you can effectively write down all of your headings with a few notes underneath. And then when you actually come to writing your essay style solution, you can reuse those headings and you give structure to your exam. And in your plan, you've already started doing some of the work. You've done a lot of the hard thinking. The actual writing of the solution then is just a matter of getting those points down once you've already done that initial upfront planning. Okay, so the next key point is about the technical knowledge required in this exam. So this case study exam, it's 50% of it is P1 questions, 25% of it is F1 questions. So that's 75% of the exam are very technical P1 and F1 questions. So your technical knowledge, you have to be good with that. You have to be familiar with P1 and F1. So if it's been a little while since you took your F1 exam or your P1 exam, you're going to want to go back and revisit some of those key topics just to make sure, because the examiner here is suggesting that to prepare for the case study exam, you should refresh your technical knowledge by studying the objective test papers. And this is what we always suggest at Astranti as well. It should be part of your phase 2 part of preparing for the case study exam. Phase 1 is, of course, learning about the pre-scene, reading the pre-scene and analysing that. Phase 2 is going back and studying key areas of the syllabus and identifying areas of weakness in your understanding. So that might mean going back to the F1 syllabus and the P1 syllabus, taking a highlighter, highlighting all the areas that you are sort of a bit rusty on, you need to study, maybe highlight those in orange or red. But the areas that you do remember, you can highlight those in green. You don't need to worry about those. But it says here in this exam, there are no topics that are off limits for a case study exam from F1, P1 or E1. So you really need to be technically prepared to answer those sorts of questions. And oftentimes the biggest weakness or the most common sort of weakness in student scripts is their lack of technical understanding. And that lack of technical understanding means they cannot apply that technical knowledge to new scenarios, which is the whole point of this exam. Okay, so in the next paragraph, there's a list of the topics that students struggled the most with. Now, I've got another video where I cover that. It's from a different examiner's report, but most of these topics are the same. I'll probably do another video going through these particular topics again, so I don't want to focus on them too much in this video, but if you're reading through this examiner's report, then obviously it's a useful list to have of areas that you really should be prepared for because they're the ones that students struggle with the most. Okay, so we'll move on slightly. The next point I want to focus on is that it's recommended that candidates prepare for the exam by studying the pre-scene. Of course, that's essential, and looking at past case studies. Now, I just want to clarify this point here. When we talk about looking at past case studies, we don't mean go back and download a pre-scene from the last 5 sittings and read through those. That's going to waste your time completely, and it might even end up confusing you because after you've read a couple of different case studies, particularly if there's similarities, you're going to end up getting confused and you're going to forget the specifics of the company that you're going to be examined on in your exam. So when we look at past case studies, what we mean is look at past papers, look at past exams and the solutions to see how this exam actually works, how the questions are written and how they basically set up what is required of you, how they ask you to perform certain tasks. And then you look at the solutions to see what kind of things you need to be talking about and how you need to set out and format your solution. Now, I will say that looking at CIMA's past papers, their exam questions are just the actual exam questions that came up in the exam. Their solutions are not perfect solutions. There are possible ways of answering this particular question, but they're not comprehensive. There could be other ways of doing it. So what you don't want to do is look at a past paper, find a question on activity-based costing, and then rote learn the CIMA solution to activity-based costing, because that's not going to be the same question you get in your exam. The pre-scene is going to be different enough. The company and scenario will be different enough that you can't just take old solutions and reapply them to new scenarios. That's not what this exam is about. And if you do that, you'll be lucky to pass. And that's what this whole paragraph is about. So look at past papers, look at case studies to understand how questions are asked and the kind of solutions you should be giving, but don't rote learn it. Don't try to, learn paragraphs and expect to do well in the exam, because that's not going to work. What you need to do in the exam is understand the technical aspects of the operational level, particularly F1 and P1, and apply that to new scenarios. It's all about testing you and your understanding of the syllabus and seeing how well you apply that to new scenarios. That's what you need to be doing. If you're doing anything else, you may not do very well in this exam. Okay, one final thing I want to point out from these general comments is about integration marks. Now there are 3 integration marks available in the operational case study exam. I would suggest that you just forget about integration marks. Don't worry about them, because if you do a good answer, if you give good answers and write a good script, you'll get integration marks. If you're worried about how you need to get integration marks, you run the risk of spending too much time trying to figure out exactly what it is. The reality is, They're just sort of extra marks you get for writing a coherent, well put together script that brings different points together and does what is asked. So they're kind of like bonus points. So don't worry too much about them. If you're doing a good job, you'll get them anyway. Okay, so that's it then for this quick video, just looking through some of the general comments from the most recent examiner's reports. Like I said, I would advise you to do this on your own, read through this in your own time. This is just the first page. There's many other pages detailing specific exams and how students dealt with that. Very, very useful information going into your exam.